As I mentioned at the beginning, global learning needs policy-related research and research-informed policy. And we will now hear one example for this relationship, and it will be presented by Professor Massimiliano Tarozzi e la Salete Coelho. Massimiliano holds the UNESCO Chair in Global Citizenship Education and Higher Education at the University of Bologna in Italy. He is coordinator and member of the advisory board of the Academic Network of Global Education and Learning, so of ANGEL, and visiting professor at the Institute of Education at the University College in London. And at the University in Bologna in Italy, he is the founding director of the International Research Center on Global Citizenship Education. His research focuses very much on global citizenship education and global citizenship and international policies, educational policies. La Salete Coelho has received the title of expert in teachers education and educational sciences in the field of development education and global citizenship education in Portugal. She's a member of the board of the Center of African Studies at the University of Porto and a founder member of the scientific journal Synergias, Educational Dialogue for Social Change. I mean, the title Educational Dialogue for Social Change is, of course, in Portuguese, but I'd say it now in English, that you understand what she's doing. And she has a very leading role in the development of the Portuguese national strategy for development, education, and global learning. And she is facilitating the Global Critical Friends process for the Dublin Declaration. So we are very looking forward to dive with you together into one possibilities of this cooperation and reflections. So the floor is yours.
Okay, so in this last session, we focus on this recent released Global Education and Learning database developed by the UNESCO Chair at the University of Bologna and the ANGEL Network in collaboration with Jean, with funding from the European Commission. This digital archive is not only a useful reference or tool for scholars, but also a powerful resource that can highlight emerging areas and research trends useful for policymakers and practitioners. Indeed, in this presentation, after presenting the genesis of the database and its main features, we will focus on some promising area of research, specifically on the conceptual database and its cultural, linguistic, and political implications. On this issue, the case of the Portuguese language is particularly emblematic. This is the reason why La Salete is here, because as a member of ANGEL's advisory board, she's also one of the key contributors of the GEL database. She will point out the role of the Portuguese language in Portugal. This project was initiated in 2017 when ANGEL published the first Global Education and Learning Digest containing only the English publication on the topic of GEL, or Global Education and Learning, since 2015. 4 more digests followed, and the number of languages has gradually grown to include 10 European languages today. This has been an important collaborative project for ANGEL community, involving 45 members in 10 European language working groups. Many of these collaborators, many of these teams are here in this room today. You made a real highly skilled volunteer job. Thanks to the collaboration of the University of Bologna library system and the expertise of the Digital Humanities Advanced Research Center at the University of Bologna, the staff of the UNESCO Chair at the University of Bologna coordinated the transformation, the digitalization of the whole data set. And for this, a special thanks is due to Carla Inguaggiato and Luca Vittori. So what it contains? So the database contains 3,500 carefully reviewed items and can be searched like a scholarly database such as Scopus or Web of Science using different query keys. It could be search by year, by language, by primary or secondary research topics, and also by types of publication. You can also search the database by typing an author name and keywords, a title of an article, of a book, or a keyword. And then this goes straight to, these queries go straight to a list of publications that can be exported in an Excel file or imported in regulars in bibliographic software. You can try it because it's easy accessible. It's a website. There's a QR code. Go straight to this database. It is easily and friendly, so you can easily try all the function and the feature of this database. One important thing is that it also contains a charts section in which graphically summarize the size of the archive and also allow you to compare the quantity of publication in the various languages over the year. This is an important point because this is a truly multilingual database, and you can compare the different weight of languages in the database. This slide is very important because while English is the lingua franca of the international academic community, this slide shows that half of the publication in the last 10 years are written in other languages, and a comprehensive literature review cannot be limited to the sole English. Multilingualism in empowering languages other than English can also contrast what Spivak defined the hegemonic monolinguistic culture, which is so important in researchers' many fields, but in particular, this global dimension in education. In short, for various reasons, the GEL database fills an empty space for research. It is a powerful research tool for the academic community, but this large and diverse database demonstrates the very existence of global education and learning as a manifold but distinctive educational research field. This field relies on a wide-ranging and coherent body of the literature in which a community can recognize itself, a research community. And the community which recognizes itself in a shared paradigm is more or less the community represented here in this room. So this is a community that recognize themselves in a shared paradigm with a common literature. Yet, GEL database is not only a tool for researchers, but is a tool for policymakers and practitioners. Not only because it also includes gray material reports and policy documents, but because it make it possible to identify trends and emerging areas which can be used to inform policy and as well as influence practice and guide, for example, training of trainers. An example of this is the background paper prepared by Angel as a network of academic as a contribution for the Genes Dublin Declaration. Last summer, researchers from the 10 research linguistic teams involved in the GEL database preparation were required to analyze their linguistic digest oriented to some guiding questions in order to develop key trends that contribute to the debate around the new declaration in their own linguistic and cultural settings, in political settings. La Salete coordinated the Portuguese language team, and I will ask her to identify which trends emerge in the literature in Portuguese and what was the impact of these trends into the national policy-making process.
Merci, Massimiliano. C'est un plaisir d'être
Thank you, Massimiliano. It's a pleasure to be with you here in this beautiful city and for this very important event for the community of global education and learning. And I'll continue in English.
And these examples are interesting, I would believe, because they can share a bit a landscape, what is going on in each country, and that can be useful also for researchers, for practitioners, for policymakers. So I will just share some questions. We received some questions from Jean to address, to help to give some inputs to Dublin Declaration, to engage in the discussion. And so the first question was about concepts and terminology, and that is really, really important one. So I will devote it to that trend some minutes in a moment. And so other question was about the integration of global education within school curricula. And it was really interesting to analyze the digest, the 5 years of a digest that we had for the Portuguese environment, and to see what were the main aspects that we could brought for there. So one of the main conclusions is that formal education is the preferential space for research about global education in Portugal. So, and that can be seen by the increasing of the number of the publications, but also the number of the events that are going on around that in Portugal. And another important aspect was that the integration of global education within school curricula could be seen in practice because of the number of the master theses that the pre-service teachers has to do in their professionalization. So that is also a conclusion that can give us some clues about what to develop and what we miss to develop. So and we cannot forget that in Portugal we have a friendly policy environment about this integration of global education within school curricula. We have a national strategy for development education. We have a national strategy for citizenship education. We have a subject in the school curricula called citizenship and development, and all of that promoted. So policy and research go side by side, can go side by side. That promoted research, and so research can supply evidence to continue or to change the policies. So the other topic, it was about integrating global education within higher education, and that we can see also that global education has been entering in the past 5 years, since we have the digest, have been entering higher education institutions. But mainly, and this is a but, and unfortunately, but mainly through this pre-service education that I was speaking. So we need to focus on development, universal development studies, for instance, and other kinds of studies, higher education studies. Other evidence that we can collect is also about the topics that are addressed in this research. So we can see that, for instance, gender equality, human rights, linguistical diversity, peace, conflict, those are the main topics. We can also see the main strategies of curricular integration. So we can also say that the main strategies of curricular integration is more about subject integration, is cross-cutting integration, is it about projects. So we can also influence what is happening in the formal sector about evidence that we can provide. So there are also some focus on in-service education, but it's less than the pre-service. We have a lot to do. What evidence suggests, and just to give you an example, I'm just feeding examples in what Massimiliano was presenting before, but evidence suggests that teachers, pre-service and in-service, they really need, they feel that they need guidance on appropriate teaching methods, about better subject knowledge and more support to be able to integrate global education into their professional practice and identity. So for instance, in looking at non-formal education, we can see a huge lack of research. So this is also give us clues about what to focus on. So I just presented some of conclusions that we could find, and of course that we look in more detail, more carefully. We can bring other tips, but we believe that these constitute the knowledge that comes from the digest, constitute a body of knowledge that can inform and support decision making in this field.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Salete. Broadly speaking, these slides illustrated the area that we're examining in the background paper I mentioned in all the languages. And it reflected the literature systematized in the database. And that can point some direction for researchers, but also, as I said, for policymakers, and demonstrated, as being demonstrated by the use of these lines of research in the drafting of the Dublin Declaration. Of course, we do not have time here to address all this issue, so I will spend the last part of this presentation on a brief discussion about one of the topics emerging in a stronger way, as also La Salette anticipated, which means the definition and conceptual debate, which also has obvious, important language implication as well. The research doesn't aim to identify the multi-phase and ambiguous scope domain of global education and learning, but to raise important conceptual and cultural issues underpinning the choice of term. The linguistic jungle is not necessarily a shaded area, fuzzy and ambiguous, but it can be an area that fosters dialogue between various actors and perspectives, provided that political actors are aware of the conceptual implication of the various definitions and choose to position themselves within them. The literature shows us that this conceptual discussion can also be understood by looking at it from an historical and from a geographical perspective, from a synchronic and a diachronic perspective. From an historical viewpoint, following Manuela Mesa's initial generation model, new global education and learning generation marked by a political milestone. In the second column, you see the political milestone characterized by prevailing terms, and key actors are highlighted. And the transforming education process that Sobita will just illustrated, just clarify some of these milestones in changing prevailing actors and the dominant terms in the definition in English. The geographical distribution of terms also provide important results that can inform policy and international collaboration between civil society organizations. This map of definition debate summarizes very schematically the discussion that is addressed in detail in the introduction of each language section of the database. Yet it gives us a picture of the richness of the global definition debate, which is not limited to Europe, even in relation to other European, it's not only related to European language in Europe, because this map clearly shows that the contribution beyond Europe can significantly enrich the field. And once again, the Portuguese case beyond Portugal is also emblematical.
Okay, thank you. And for the next slide, just so I come back to this conceptual discussion. So when we look at the Portuguese digest, so we can see the main terms that are used in the literature in Portugal. So and we can see, we can analyze the titles, and we can discover, for instance, in Portugal, development education and global citizenship education are the terms most used. But we can see, we analyze also by whom they are being produced. So when they are more official, they come from the official Ministry of Education or Foreign Affairs, they are more about development education, because it's the official name that we have in Portugal. But if it comes from civil society, we can find global citizenship education, for instance. So in many places and titles, we can see them combined, development education and global citizenship education. But and academia reflects and discusses all of these trends, all of these conversations. But we can also look at where it is produced, because the Portuguese-speaking world is not just Portugal, so it's bigger than that. So we can find some publications with the titles "Education for Social Change with a Visible Influence from Latin America" or "Planetary Citizenship Education," for instance. And we can see that this has an influence in our major document in Portugal in this field is the National Strategy on Development Education. And every time we started a new edition, so we are starting now in the second semester, the elaboration of the third edition of our national strategy, the conceptual debate is immediately the first step that we take. We immediately have a workshop about what is the conceptual debate, what is going on, to inform and to document it on the national strategy education in Portugal. And this is so important in the Portuguese-speaking countries that I'd like just to share with you an example. In the Portuguese-speaking team of the digest started as the others, identifying the terms that we should look in the databases, in the national and international databases. So we started with those 5 persons, and when we were looking in 2019 and 20, we were looking for the terms development education, global citizenship education that we looked in Portugal. So, but then, and we expected to have lots of information coming from other Portuguese-speaking countries, Brazil or some Africans, but we didn't find. So for us, that was shocking. So we decided to do something that usually we don't do in Europe, is go beyond our myopia and ask for people to tell us what we were doing wrong. So we did a round table in 2021, inviting some guests from Brazil to tell us, to discuss with us, what were we missing? Why things are not appearing in our database? And so we discovered a new world, as I was saying, planetary citizenship, social change. So we are missing the terms that we were searching. So we included that person. So in 2022, the team was already included. So the Portuguese-speaking team right now is composed by 2 teams: the Portuguese team, the Brazilian team, and now the next step is to go for other African-speaking countries to constitute their own teams to help us to have a Portuguese-speaking digest more complete.
Thank you, Salete. Let me conclude, because the database, the GEL database, is distributed free of charge to all university libraries for inclusion in their own catalogue. So I will like to urge you to ensure that the libraries in your country, in your university, and in your city will include this database in their own catalog. Well, to conclude, it is important that the conceptual debate, the conceptual definition, and linguistic debate is crucial, but it's also important not to enclose the definitional database within linguistic fences, national political culture, definitional grids, and rigid analytical classification of global education and learning components. Research advises to move from silos to a holistic and integrated approach, bringing together issues such as peace, social justice, cultural diversity, and sustainability, no matter whether in which language are expressed, and especially bridging the divide between environmental and social sphere. This is precisely what is reflected in the program of this conference. Thank you very much.